that I had the time to think about what big project I want to tackle next, and it's artificial intelligence or artificial general intelligence. Artificial general intelligence was really the realization. My software company, we built a very powerful software product, and I was very proud of it, and it did well. But it also was dumb. Like all software, it doesn't have intelligence, it doesn't learn, it doesn't have common sense. That's really the challenge. How can we make software intelligent? How can we build software that can actually learn and reason and think the way humans do?
Have you ever wondered how AI can become truly intelligent? My guest today is Peter Voss, the man who coined artificial general intelligence. And he's here to shed light on the future of AI. So welcome to the show, Peter.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's really great to have someone of your caliber here. Really do appreciate you taking the time to be here. And so the first question I have for you is, can you just share a little bit more? You've kind of an unconventional educational journey, according to my notes. So how has that journey shaped your career?
Yes, indeed. I actually didn't finish high school, so I had to start working at 16. So I did a couple of different jobs just to earn money, like work at the bank, at a motorcycle shop, at a hamburger place. But I was really interested in technology and particularly electronics. So I managed to get an apprenticeship in a company that did electronics, and I actually managed to work my way up as an electronics engineer. Then I started my own company doing electronics. Fell in love with software as, electronics became programmable. And then my company turned into a software company. I developed an ERP software package, and that company did quite well. We went from the garage to 400 people, did an IPO. So that was fun. Learned a lot, made a lot of mistakes, and so on. And it's really when I exited this company that I had the time to think about what big project I want to tackle next. And it's artificial intelligence or artificial general intelligence.
Yeah, no, that seems to be a theme among people, is either like when they graduate college, they go in a completely different direction than they had anticipated when they entered college, or like a situation like yours where a lot of people, they get out of high school. In your case, you didn't graduate high school, but in their case they do. And they also go in a completely different direction. I think that's what happens with people who have a kind of a passion for technology, because technology is constantly changing directions. Maybe when you start your journey down the educational path, you think to yourself, that's not really that interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
But then along the way, something comes up and it really sparks the interest. What was the motivation though to pivot from electronics engineering to AGI?
From electronics to software was really just literally falling in love with software. Initially, I designed electronic circuits, and you design the circuit. And in those days, we didn't have computers to do the design, so it's all manually designed. Then you get the circuit board manufactured, and that might take a week, and then you populate it and so on. So the whole cycle takes a long time before you actually get a product that's working. Once you get to software, you can have an idea, sit down, and an hour later, you have something that works. So that's how it transitioned from hardware to software focus. Artificial general intelligence was really the realization. My software company, we built a very powerful software product, and I was very proud of it, and it did well. But it also was dumb, like all software. It doesn't have intelligence. It doesn't learn. It doesn't have common sense. So if the programmer doesn't think of something, it'll just give you an error message or crash or do something silly. So when I sold my interest in the company, that's really the challenge. How can we make software intelligent? How can we build software that can actually learn and reason and think the way humans do? And that seemed like just an amazing challenge to take on. So I actually took off 5 years to study all different aspects of intelligence, starting with philosophy of epistemology, theory of knowledge. How do we know anything? How can we be certain of things? What is our relationship to reality? Are we making it up, or can we get to know it? And where does free will come in, and consciousness, and the philosophical aspect of understanding intelligence? And then in cognitive psychology, studying how children learn, what IQ tests measure, how our intelligence differs from animal intelligence, and so on. And then, of course, I also studied the work that had been done in the field of AI. So it was that 5 years of study that really brought me into the field of AGI.
So that kind of ignited your passion then, is what you're saying?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, that's really interesting. That's commendable to go down a pathway like that and do some studying. For me, we run multiple businesses. And so one of the things that became a necessity for me was understanding marketing. And
Mhm.
as we chatted about earlier, I think us tech people, we're very like analytical and things have
Mhm.
1 + 1 has to equal 2 and that
Right.
sort of thing. And in marketing, it's just so, you go with your feelings and your gut and you use
Mhm.
this. Of course, what do they always tell you? Figure out the psychographic about your
Mhm.
target client. And I'm just like, psychographic? What are you talking about? How do I know if they're a 40-year-old married person
Mhm.
with 3 children? How do I know that? And so I did the same thing. I spent a couple years studying marketing just so I could help with our business. And it's really paid off. It didn't really completely ignite a passion for marketing, but it did ignite a passion for me of just writing better, presenting my messages in a better way. One of the things in my coaching program I'm huge with is teaching people jargon-free communication. I
Right.
think too many tech people talk with acronyms that nobody understands except for them. And I believe like we have to speak to people where they're at. And I think that's super important. That's where I a little passionate about the marketing aspect, what came from that. But once
Yeah,
it's,
I can relate to that because I've always been both CEO, running the company, and also chief scientist. So in running the company, you obviously you need to get sales, you need to work with customers, and you need to get your message out there. And it can't just be dry, it has to appeal. Now, fortunately, my passion usually comes through, the passion for what I'm doing,
yeah,
and that helps. But I don't really have a lot of tolerance for advertising and fluff and
yeah,
stuff like
yeah,
that,
me
you know.
either, me either. Even like, my gosh, just even writing a LinkedIn post. Sometimes my coach would say to me, "No, you need to put more emotion in there." I didn't feel emotion for that. So why am I going to put emotion there? It doesn't make any sense to me. When you think about it in the grand scheme of things, it starts to make sense. But could you maybe explain what's the vision behind IGO.AI and what sets it apart from other AI technologies?
Yes, certainly. IGO.AI was really formed to create artificial general intelligence. So I think I need to talk a little bit about what
Yes.
I mean by that. As you mentioned, I coined the term in 2002, actually together with two other people, Ben Goertzel and Shane Legg. The three of us decided to write a book on this topic. And to come up with a book title, we went through a couple of iterations and we agreed that artificial general intelligence captured that. Let me elaborate a little bit on that and why we even coined the term. So when when the term AI was coined 69 years ago, it was about building thinking machines that can think, learn, and reason the way humans do, human-like intelligence. So what happened over the decades is the field of AI really turned into the field of narrow AI, where you pick one particular problem you want to solve, and it's the engineer's ingenuity that solves the problem. For example, IBM's Deep Blue, the world chess champion, it's the ingenuity, it's the intelligence of the programmers who figured out how to use a computer to play an awesome game of chess. It's not that the computer itself has the intelligence to figure it out. And that's really the mode we've been in. And the three of us and a few other people around said, we feel the time is ripe to go back to the original dream of AI, to build thinking machines. But we felt we needed to give it a different name to distinguish it from this narrow AI field. And that's really how artificial general intelligence came about. Now, the idea is if you have a computer that can think, learn, and reason the way humans do, it implies they could do any job, certainly any desk-bound job that a human can do. And that's profound. You can now make 1 million copies of that, and you have 1 million instantaneously. You have 1 million PhD level cancer researchers that can chip away at this problem, communicate with each other, actually reason much better than humans can. And so the progress we'll make in all kind of fields requiring research, whether it's battery technology, pollution, or diseases, will be tremendous. And then, of course, the cost of goods and services will plummet as we can automate more and more things. Human labor is just inherently very expensive. And we can have these personal assistants that are more like an extension of our own mind, like an exocortex, that can help us think something like you wish Siri could do, that it would really understand you and learn and be able to do things for you rather than just answering one-shot questions. So that's really AGI. And my company is dedicated to achieving AGI. We do have a commercial product out there, that conversational AI, which replaces call center agents. One of the projects we have is with 1-800-Flowers, a group of companies, Harry and David and them. And at Valentine's Day, a few months ago, we replaced 3,000 agents, where they normally have to hire 3,000 agents to just for a few days to handle that massive spike. So that's a commercial side, but really my passion and the goal of the company is to get to full human level AI, AGI.
That's really interesting. You mentioned Deep Blue, and I'm a chess player, so I want to ask a question about, probe that a little bit. That in that case, like it's about the intelligence of the programmers. But then you have AlphaZero, which literally just consumed like 40 million chess games and taught itself how to play chess. And not only did it teach itself how to play chess, it seems to be redefining the strategies, et cetera, involved. The former world champion, still the #1 player in the world, Magnus Carlsen, he said when he reviewed those games, he saw things he'd never thought of before. And now he uses those same strategies in games, and it's elevated his game. So like, how do you see this being different? Because like in the case of Deep Blue, they programmed the strategies in, they taught it how to look deeper and deeper into position. But with AlphaZero, it taught itself. What do you see as the differences there?
Yes, there is a profound difference. And in fact, there's a good model that DARPA came up with a few years ago. They call it the 3 waves of AI. And what they mean by that, the first wave is basically what we now refer to as good old-fashioned AI. Those are the rule-based systems, expert systems, and Deep Blue would be an example of that. Mm-hmm. That's the first wave. The second wave then hit us like a tsunami about 12, 14 years ago, which is all about big data, number crunching, statistical systems. And this clearly changes the game, where the programmer doesn't actually write the code, but it's more the data scientist who figures out how you can train the system. There's still a lot of parameters set up and a lot of different things that have to be tried. Go and everything that DeepMind has done requires enormous amount of external human intelligence to actually set up the system. And that's true for large language models. To get them to do anything useful, you always need that human in the loop to configure the system, to give it the right data, to process the data. So it's not directly the programmer writing code so much. There's some of that. It's really more about the data scientist now massaging the data and how to train the system to basically build a model. It's not the system is thinking about playing chess. It's a statistical model that is built through this massive amount of information that allows it to play chess and Go. But these systems actually fall apart when you change the rules. If you just change the rules, they can't think. Whereas a human and an AGI, artificial general intelligence, would be able to adapt to the change of rules. And that is where we come into the third wave of AI. So the second wave now, everybody's talking about generative AI, statistical and generative AI. The third wave is cognitive AI. It's where your starting point is, what does intelligence truly require? What is important in human intelligence? That's your starting point. Not, we have a lot of data, we have a lot of computing power, that's a hammer we've got, what nails can we find? Yes, there's definitely a transition from specifically writing code to solve a problem to building an ecosystem that can use massive amounts of data to build a statistical model. But we need to really transition to this third wave where the system can learn interactively and understand what it's doing.
And that's supposed to be one of the strengths of the AlphaZero approach, is that you start out with this data set of 40 million games. But then, of course, what people don't think about is then the more it plays games itself, the more information it's gathering, the more it learns, the better it can play. And that seems to be holding true. Like they have world computer chess championships, and the AlphaZero models have outperformed any of the like Deep Blue type models exponentially, because it's like a human. If a human's playing in a chess tournament, and especially if it's a match where you're playing the same player multiple times, the human will play an opening and they'll have it prepared and they play the opening, and then the opponent uncorks a novelty on them and they're like, oh my gosh, what happened? And maybe they'll lose the game, or it ends up in a really, like, they lose their edge completely and it ends up in a dead draw. the computer, the human is going to go, okay, next time we play that opening, I'm going this direction instead of that direction. They learn from the mistake.
Right.
The computers are starting to do that as well, where they'll mark the line as, okay, this was dubious. There was a problem. And then if it happens a couple of times, they'll avoid that line completely. And that's going to make, in my opinion, one of the things that made computers a little bit easier to beat before when you played chess was the repetition. Like they just do the same thing. Okay, same moves. In fact, I can remember one of the first chess computers I had, I could play the same opening lines and it would make the same mistake every time. It was no fun because you could just beat the computer every single time.
Yeah.
So anyway, I appreciate that. It's because that's a kind of the whole AlphaZero thing. It was intriguing to me. I read the book that they put out about it, and they put games in there, and some of the stuff just blew my mind. I've played for my entire life, and I just never saw something like this. So
the whole statistical that wave that we're riding now, it's phenomenal progress that's been made in so many areas, in speech recognition, translation, image recognition, and game playing, as you say. And now with large language models, ChatGPT, it's phenomenal what they can do. But you put your finger on a really important point. Yes, these models can learn, but their learning is always in batch. You have to retrain the model. And now with large language models, you're talking about $200 million to build a model from scratch with 20 trillion tokens of training. And they only achieve that performance by that. And so with the chess model, it's the same. They can learn from these additional games, but only by building a new model, going to a new model. And human intelligence and real intelligence is very different. As we are having this conversation here, we are updating our model in real time, incrementally. I'm learning from you, you're learning from me. Or if we read an article, every sentence, potentially we say, does this make sense? Do I understand it? Does it contradict something I know? What does it make me think of? And that's really, this adaptive intelligence is incredibly important in the real world. You need to be able to adapt to changing circumstances in real time. And the second wave statistical models simply cannot do that. In fact, the word GPT already tells you that. G tells you that it's generative, it makes up stuff. That's hallucinations. The P, it's pre-trained. It's trained at the factory, and afterwards it's a read-only model. And the T is transformer technology, which is the massive breakthrough in boosting the performance of statistical systems. But transformers commit you to backpropagation, which again means having to train the whole number crunch, 10 trillion tokens, 10 times to build the model. And so it's fundamentally not going to get us to AGI.
Yeah, it's to me, the way that I've often thought about it is it's like a caching database on a website. You're adding more and more info to it, but until it has time to incorporate it into the main rules, it isn't really doing much with what it's learning. But it brings up an ethical question for me. Like you mentioned, and you made the point that it gets more and more data, but I'm sure a lot of that data is coming from the inputs that it's receiving, from the prompts that it's receiving. What are some of the ethical considerations around taking data that someone is providing to you to get answers and using it to further the AGI, the artificial intelligence system?
Yeah, it's a tricky question. Personally, my personal opinion is I'm not really in favor of software patterns and things like that. To me, it's more let humanity move forward. And you take music and writing and so on, it always builds on other people. Of course, it's a really difficult fine line to say, when are you copying too much? When are you borrowing too much from somebody else? And what's the important point? Is the important point that they should get royalties or credit or something? Yes, it's nice. Somebody copies slides that I made up for a presentation. I like to see that they acknowledge they got it from me. But if they don't, I'm moving on. If you're creative, you're always creating new things. Other people's creativity helps me, and if my creativity can help other people. So I don't see that as such a huge deal. And it's difficult to basically say at what point does fair use no longer apply. Now, once we have AGI, you're now looking at sort of superhuman learning ability. Now, as a human, I can read anything that's out there and use that knowledge. Nobody can ask me for royalties for an idea I got from a book or an article or something I saw on YouTube. If I get that knowledge, it's in my brain, I can use it. And there's no argument about that.
I completely agree with you on
Yeah.
that. I think
Yeah.
that people should be aware of where they're putting their data. I've always
Yeah.
felt this way. Like even back when online shopping started to become a thing,
Right.
it used to hear the term, oh, that website looks like a Russian hacker website. Don't put your credit card in there. That's being intelligent. It's assessing the situation and it's saying, do I want to give this my information or not? Well, it's the same thing. I feel if you're going to put like your entire company's financial records into ChatGPT, you take the risk. And I totally agree with you on what you said. It's actually, to me, it's the perfect analogy. If I sit down on and I want to watch YouTube videos about something, somebody's bound to teach me something. And that thought that they taught me is going to trigger maybe some innovation in my head.
Yeah.
And if I then take that and run with it, am I supposed to pay that person part of the profit that I make? No, I mean, I used it. They gave me the information, but I took it and ran with it and did what I needed to do with it. I think I totally agree with you on that. I think it's about.
Right. Yeah, I think we could use a lot more ethics, though, in the world generally. So if you truly are copying a paragraph from somebody or you get a good idea, as an ethical person, you should give credit. It's the nice thing to do. It's the right thing to do. And say, this wasn't my idea directly. This part here was, hey, somebody gave me this idea. I read it here. I copied it from here. Or it's inspired by or whatever. It's a nice thing to do, but let's move on. Let's get more technology. Let's get more stuff done. Let's increase human flourishing. That should be the thrust of what we create.
The thing about giving attribution, it's interesting you say, because I just had a conversation. We have a YouTube channel about Las Vegas, and we want to go to there's a museum called the Neon Museum. And basically they have all the old relic signs from the different casinos that are no longer here or somewhere they swapped it out. And they have a very strict rule about not filming. So we inquired because they have a media inquiry and they said, oh, you can, as long as you only use your phone and not some big giant camera, you can film, but you must give attribution that this came from the Neon Museum. And so then the person and I started having this conversation about it. And she said, yeah, you won't believe how many times like they'll take a photo and then they'll turn it into some kind of artwork and they won't say that it came from here and we built that installation to look that way. So they didn't actually do anything. And so that's why we started to become really strict about giving attribution. And I told her, I said, I personally feel like exactly like you said, if I'm writing an article and I find something that, I don't know, let's say Elon Musk wrote about a topic and I take one or two paragraphs from his work, I'm most definitely going to give him the credit for that because I didn't write it. So why wouldn't I want to give him credit for it? Plus, it also gives the person consuming that content the answer of, if I want to find out more about this right here, I'm going to go find that Elon Musk article and learn more about it.
Good point. Yeah.
So what role do you think cognitive AI is playing in creating personalized customer experiences in the future? What role do you see it playing?
Cognitive AI to me is really synonymous with artificial general intelligence, except the point to which we've been working on it for 20 years with a relatively small team. We've not up to now managed to crack getting enough funding to really accelerate the development, which is actually something we're working on right now. We have a team of 10 people working on core development, and we're really not in an R&D mode anymore. In research, we are much more in a development mode. We know what needs to be done. So I see that the same. So currently, cognitive AI is a preview of what AGI can do. In the example of 1-800-Flowers, where you have a conversational agent, we call it a chatbot with a brain, whereas all the other chatbots don't have a brain. They just have a flowchart. And this is why people usually hate these systems. They go to a bank or an airline or whatever, and it's somebody designed the flowchart. And if what you want to do fits the flowchart, okay, good, then you're good to go. But more often than not, it gets stuck somewhere in the flowchart, gets into a loop or doesn't understand you, or you have a different question, and then things are pretty awful. So by having a brain, by having a cognitive AI engine driving the conversation, you have short-term memory. You remember what was said earlier in the conversation. You have long-term memory. Remember what was said in previous conversations, which is better than talking to a human even. And you have reasoning ability. You have the ability for the system to think about what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. You have deep understanding. So that's the cognitive engine. Now, we're not at human level yet with that, but it gives you a much better experience than you can get with kind of the 30-year-old flowchart approach that everybody is still using. But really our focus is on, let's crank up that IQ. Let's get to AGI and get all the benefits to humanity of having radical abundance and help human flourishing.
Yeah, the chatbots remind me of IVR systems, and they can be really frustrating because you create this menu structure like you call like a flow chart. But what if you forgot an option that might be obvious right there?
Yeah.
Maybe I want to look something. Maybe I want to give you my order number and just look something up right there. If you don't think of it to give it to them,
Right.
that customer is expecting to be able to do that and they can't. So that's interesting. Talking about like the 1-800-Flowers chat agent situation, it brings up something I just read, and I wonder what you know about this, what you have to say on this. McDonald's was testing AI order taking through drive-through, and they just shelved it because it was in one instance it asked them to put bacon on someone's ice cream. It charged like thousands of dollars for chicken McNuggets. What do you think was the mistake there?
I actually happen to know the person who developed this technology. He actually sold the company to McDonald's. And then McDonald's suddenly found themselves with an AI company they didn't know what to do with because the founders didn't want to work in this corporate environment, so they're off. And then they partnered with IBM to try and expand this and move it forward. It's just inherently very challenging. So there are a few things. The one thing is speech recognition itself simply isn't there yet. Even with the massive advances that we have with OpenAI's Whisper is a lot better than previous speech recognition, but it's still not there. It still misrecognizes a lot of things. Now you add to that people in a car making a noise, playing music or whatever with accents. They may not speak English very well. The speech recognition itself is already, it's not a solved problem. It's simply not there. Now, but there's also the cognitive element. The speech recognition is, again, dumb. It's a statistical word prediction or word recognition system. It doesn't have any metacognition. It doesn't figure out what actually makes sense. It doesn't have common sense. That's where you need a cognitive AI engine that can actually say, does this even make any sense at all? Does somebody order 20 extra orders of bacon or bacon on ice cream or whatever? And so you need to solve two problems. The one is the speech recognition has to become better, but more importantly, you need an intelligence engine in the background that can interpret that. So what we innovated many years ago when I first started automating call centers, my first commercial AI company called Smart Action, we actually used the speech engines, which were much less sophisticated then, got all of the hypotheses that the speech engine came up with. But instead of just taking the weighting of the speech engine and taking the top hypothesis, which all of our competitors were doing, we would look at the top 10 hypotheses that the speech engine came up with and feed that through the cognitive engine and say, essentially re-ranking them based on what is the context, what makes sense. And we were able to get better performance. But you're not going to solve that problem essentially without AGI being able to reinterpret. And the other thing that's missing is the statistical models don't know what they don't know. They don't have a sense of, I didn't understand that. Whereas a human would say, this doesn't make sense. I didn't quite hear you. And they'll come back and ask you. These models don't do that because they don't have that metacognition. They might just completely fail and say, I didn't understand. Can you repeat it? Which gets very tiresome. It's more like you need to be just subtle. Which part didn't you understand? Did you say bacon? Sort of.
Did you say you wanted bacon on your hot fudge sundae? What's that about? Yeah.
It's just premature technology for really a very difficult use case. There's background noise and accents, limited command of English language, makes it hard.
So how do you stay ahead of the curve in such a rapidly evolving field?
Answer would simply be, we are working on the third wave of AI when everybody else is working on the second wave. So inherently, we're ahead. Now, we yet have to demonstrate that sufficiently convincing for us to reach financial escape velocity. So we need to get our next stage of development is to basically build a working prototype of kind of a true AGI engine that isn't fully developed yet, the ChatGPT 2 moment when the investors saw what ChatGPT 2 could do. Okay, it wasn't that useful yet, but they could see, wow, if we can scale that up, it's going to be significant. So that's really our next milestone, is to grow our team to accelerate development for us to get to this demo AGI engine using a cognitive AI approach.
Interesting. Yeah, you're ahead of the curve already. So if you had to explain AGI to a child, how would you do it?
It's a computer that can learn like you can, that can learn by interacting with the world, that can pick up new things. That if I show you, if you've never seen a giraffe before, and I show you one picture of a giraffe, you'll now know what a giraffe looks like, and you'll be able to recognize a pink giraffe. You'll recognize it from the left, from the right, from the top. That's the kind of computer that it can basically learn from interacting with the world and interacting with you and become really smart like you.
That's great. I love the way you did that. That's actually, I think that would be extremely effective, because that's one of the things children don't understand technical concepts depending on their age. So all right. So we're getting close to running out of time, but what's a common myth or misconception about AI that you'd like to debunk?
Of course, now it's going away, but the myth is that one of the big things was that large language models are going to get us to true intelligence. And I think a year ago, I was blown away by when ChatGPT came out, I was blown away. I did not think it was possible to do that just with statistics and a lot of data. I think we were all blown away. So at that point, the question was, can you just continue scaling that up? And I think that myth is disappearing, that attention is all we need. Now Sam Altman says $7 trillion is all we need. You get Jan LeCun, the chief AI scientist of Meta, Facebook, saying very clearly that large language models are not going to get us to AGI. They're an off-ramp to AGI. They're a distraction. They're a dead end. And I would agree with that. There are a lot of use cases, but you can't get away from the lack of accuracy. If the system is 95% accurate, but it has to go through 7 steps, you're at 60% accuracy, and you can't get away from the hallucination. And more importantly, you can't get away from the lack of the inability to learn in real time that we spoke about earlier, which is really crucial to intelligence. And that's quite apart from our brain uses 20 watts or something like that, not 20 gigawatts to learn stuff. It's what's the environmental impact? What is the cost of what they're talking about, building completely new power centers to power these new systems?
People who want to lose weight and they tell them to eat 5 times a day, but they have to be 80% compliant. And people go, oh my gosh, 80% compliant. If they were to stop and think about it, 5 meals a day, 7 days a week is 35 meals, 20% can be non-compliant. That's, quite a few meals. That's 7 meals that you have that you don't have to be compliant, which is 1 a day. If you think about that, shouldn't be that hard to do. But yet when you flip the coin and you say, okay, the AI is only accurate 95% of the time, and then it has to figure out the other 5%. That 5% is dangerous, because that's where I love that you use the term on your website, hallucination, because that's exactly what I see ChatGPT do sometimes. Like, it will hallucinate. I find it humorous. Sometimes I have a tool that I use called Decipher, and I upload the episode to it and it transcribes it for me, but it also does a bunch of other things. But then sometimes I'll take the transcript and I'll have some of the AI tools analyze it and tell me, like, what are the best moments? Or better yet, I use the transcript to search for like things that I put in my notes. Like, we've had a few things we've discussed here that I want to make sure I pull out. And you put it in there. Interesting, like ChatGPT will just go, you'll say, okay, here's this thing about someone, summarize it, go. And it does its thing. You give it to Gemini, and Gemini's a little pickier. Gemini will say, I don't know this person. How can I summarize this? I don't know this person. And then you say to yourself, Gemini, you have a transcript. That's how you do it. But even worse than that, I recently had a situation where ChatGPT was down, and I wanted I had an idea for a title for an episode. And I'm like, I want some other ideas that are similar to this. This just doesn't seem strong enough. And it had blah, 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 blah with Dion Wilson. ChatGPT had no problem giving me like 25, 30 suggestions for the title. Gemini kept saying, I don't know who Dion Wilson is, so I can't generate that. So of course, then you just take that with Dion Wilson off, and then it does it. But I find it interesting that it took it literally, that it needed to tell me about that person, whereas ChatGPT was just like more than happy to just be like, I don't know what you're talking about. but here, let me throw something out
Right.
there.
Yeah. It's basically how they're tuned on how careful they are about It's a guardrails that they put around because, yeah, these systems don't know what they don't know and they don't know what they're talking about. It's just statistical prediction. It's very impressive, but yet there's nobody at home.
Yeah. The lights are on, but nobody's home.
Right.
This has been an interesting conversation. Honestly, one of the best I've had with somebody about AI. You have quite a lot of knowledge. Why don't you let our listeners know where they could connect with you if they want to reach out?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, website, IGO.AI, but also you can find me very easily on LinkedIn and Twitter. And yeah, I have a lot of articles linked from the website that I've written about philosophy, AI, ethics, free will, all sorts of things.
Excellent. Excellent. We'll get that into the show notes and into the YouTube description. But thanks again so much for being here. I know it's not always easy to take time out of your day to sit and talk to somebody like me and answer questions. So I truly appreciate it.
Yes, great. Thank you. Very good questions. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right. Thanks everyone for being here for another episode of Gaining the Technology Leadership Edge. New episodes every Wednesday on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. See you next week.